Hi, my name is Rodolfo Mogora, and this is Diversity Module 7. In the 1997 case of University and Community College System of Nevada versus Farmer, Farmer was initially awarded 40,000 K in damages for violation of the Equal Act pay. The university won an appeal in front of the state of Nevada Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court declined to hear the case, leaving the lower court's verdict in place. The defender critiqued the finding of the Nevada Supreme Court using a deontological and teleological approach. The case of the the case of the University and Community College System of Nevada versus Farmers shows inequality about men and women. It violated the Equal Pay Act by paying her unequal wages for equal work relative to a male employee to similar qualification. I believe that Farmer should have gotten a lot more money than the amount that she was settled for. I agree that the Supreme Court did not open the case for it to argue against Farmer. The reason why we had rules is for everyone to follow and not allow anyone to break it. I am defending their verdict because they will try they will try to argue that they did not break any rules or laws. I understand that the university is trying to increase their diversity by hiring an African American professor and that they have a special rule when they do, but when their diversity, sorry, I mean, I understand that the university is trying to increase their diversity by hiring an African American professor and that they have a special rule when they do, but trying to pay someone less not because of its qualification but because of its sex is immoral. I always wonder why everyone keeps telling me not to tell anyone how much you're making, especially with your peers or coworkers. I did not complain because it was my first nursing job, but as I got to know my coworkers, which majority were females, I quickly learned that I was making more than they were making. Every pay period, they would always show their pay stubs, which I didn't appreciate because they would make me show mine. But when I learned that I was making more, I never showed them mine. I was just considering if the rate when I came in changed compared to my coworkers' rate who had been a nurse longer than I was. When they finally broke me and I told them how much I was making, they all freaked out and demanded to talk to the supervisor or the HR about the situation. We were all doing the same thing, and I didn't see why they would make less than I was making, even though they were experienced and been there for a long time. We also found out that they hired another person after me, and she wasn't making the same amount that I was making, which made more sense to me that it's not fair. Companies should have a set rate on how much a person would made would be made regardless of their gender. It should be determined by years experience of the person. Question number two: the Watchmark Comitel Corporation has undergone significant changes since their case of outsourcing. They were renamed Valent Corporation and later were acquired by IBM. This shows the competitive nature of the software industry. Based on this knowledge, examine the outsourcing action taken by Watchmark Com- Com- Comnitel from the deontological and theological perspective. The software industry is a very competitive business. The Watchmark Commental did a great job, but want to expand and have a diverse people. They know that the company will do better if they were acquired by a bigger company that is already established with many connections around the world. The company went through a few changes before being acquired by the IBM. They were renamed Valiant Corporation. The new name Valiant is a derivative word combining elements relevant to company's overall positioning and the combined brand assets of Watchmark, Comnitel Technologies, and Metrica Software System. These brands' attributes of value, leadership, reliability, and trust represent the strength of the combined organization and sum up a company that will provide customers with both stability and forward-looking vision. The moral obligation and duties of the company are to provide great services to their clients, which is part of the deontological category of ethical viewers. The second category of ethical approaches is theological, which addresses the good that comes from a focus and ends achieved by a complete, contemplated action. This approach holds the right or good decision making. It weighs a good decision for the bigger picture. The theological the teleological approach is action based, connected with implementation, while the deontological approach has concerned the process. The decisions is then made to follow the path that provides the greatest overall gain for the least cost. By getting bought by IBM, they had to make a decision that is for the greater good. IBM is a great company that will continue what they have started. Question number 3. Present an argument that is a easier for employers to comply with diversity legislation in Canada than in the United States. This is an interesting subject. I've never really read about how Canadian works or how their laws are, but this was for me was pretty interesting. It is easier to comply with diversity legislation in Canada because the percentage of companies who are following the federal law in Canada is significantly lower compared to the United States. Another key difference is that the Canadian federal government has less power than the US government, especially where employment regulation concerns. On employment issues, laws of the Canadian federal government affect only those industries that are federally regulated according to the Canadian Constitution. The examples are the broadcasting, telecommunications, banking, railroads, airlines, shipping, other transport across provincial boundaries, uranium mining, and Crown Corporation. Companies in which the government owns all the stock, such as the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. The result is that only 10% of employees in Canada are covered by Canadian federal law, while 90% are covered by the laws of their province or territory. This makes it easier because imagine the companies that are only ones to follow the rules, that are only ones mandated to follow the rules. My question is it being complied by the provinces that has its own law and that they do not have to comply with federal law? Employment equity was created by Canadians to prevent discriminations against women, disabled people, and minorities with disability, and visible minorities. The Canadians also have the point of law which summarizes the diversity legislation of federal Canadians federal jurisdiction. The first one is Charter to Right of Freedom. This is part of the Canadian Constitution and is roughly parallel to the U.S. Bill of Rights. The second one is the Canadian Human Rights Act, forbids the indirect discrimination of the basis of race, gender, sexual orientation, disability status, and certain other grounds. The third one is the Canadian Employment Equity Act. This requires employers to engage in proactive measures to increase the representation of four specific groups: women, abor, aboriginal people, people with disabilities, and members of the visible minorities. This helps employers to comply with diversity by looking at the Canadian Employment Equity Act. It guides them from discriminating against the four specific groups to be not discriminated against. Question number 4 is select a source of media and outline an exercise in media diversity. Comment on the questions listed on the textbook for the media option you selected. Well, right now I do not have any cable because I don't really have time to watch TV, but you know, I also don't have any antenna, for the non-cable ones, but so I'm not able to watch any prime time TV drama. But I love watching NCIS, Grey's Anatomy, House, and Criminal Minds. The audience that they are targeting, the audience that they are targeting are general populations, general are general population ages between 13 to 65 and older. Anybody younger than 13 will probably see it boring or more for an adult because of the medical terminologies that are being used from Grey's Anatomy and House, or it would be scary and inappropriate for them to watch NCIS and Criminal Minds because of its brutal scenarios. The Criminal Minds is about the crimes that happens in the services that we have. They are more like the police for the Navy, Marines, Air Force, and Army. Its message is to solve the crimes that is happening inside those four services. Grey's Anatomy is a mixture of fiction with a bit of reality that nurses and doctors might experience while working in a hospital setting. The drama part is sometimes a little over than what truly is happening, but it's just a show. House is more diagnosing rare cases that could happen to a person. Criminal Minds are the horrific situation that could happen to a person, but we know that someone or something is there to help when it happens to us. The commercials that they have targets every age. Me not really able to watch commercials in between those shows, I will be providing commercials that I always hear lately. Most of the commercial that I'm seeing is about coronavirus and how we could prevent the spread by staying home, wearing a mask, and social distancing. I think that I think the commercials that we are seeing, it's every age. I mean, by this time, I would not know anyone that still does not know anything about coronavirus. The commercials that I have been seeing also is about the politics. It is given that the election is right around the corner, and the target group age for those commercials are the people who are old enough to vote. I am not going to get into politics, but our country sure needs a new change and new leader and a new leader. The last commercial that sticks are the insurance commercials. There are so much insurance commercial that I know pretty much most of them. The targeted group for that is the people who owns properties and drives an automobile. I never truly understand the amount of money that a big company spends for commercial, but now I realize that commercial is not cheap and it's one way to really get the message out. And that's it. Thank you for listening.